OBS Tribe, where are you at? We are live, waiting for things to calm down a little bit in the room there. Hoping we're going to be able to hear things as folks are settling down, getting excited about the mental health matters panel discussion.
Thank you so much for being
here we go. Let's tune in.
My name is Patrick Sutler. I work with Turner Construction and leader of the local community of practice for LCI. So again, thank you for being here. Just a couple of quick announcements. I always thank the people that are on our core team that helped put this together. All of our presentations, tours, informal events. So Chris Sellers is with TD. He's not here right now. Lyndon is with HKS, and she just walked out. There's Lyndon. Jennifer Lacey with Roxanne Morton. Keon Zandy with South Group. Reed Brown with Turner. Stephen Powell with Meadows and Ole. And Steve Turner with FPI Builders. So again, thank you for all the work that you guys do as a team. Two future opportunities that we've got coming up. We've got a job site tour at one of FPI's projects on June 22nd. That's a Wednesday at 1:30. That information has not been sent out yet, but forthcoming. And then also a lean coffee that will be held at Skyler's Group July 27th at 7:30 in the morning. So nice to have those. A plug, we've got Congress coming up in New Orleans, October 18th through the 20th, I believe are the dates. So hope to have a hurricane with some of you guys there. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our moderators, and then I think they'll kick off. So we've got Jennifer Lacey with Roxanne Morton, Jesse Hernandez with Steph Builder. Together, they have a YouTube channel, or is that what we call it?
Yeah.
Okay, YouTube channel. No BS with Jess and Jen. And that is being recorded right now, and I think live stream.
Correct, we're live streaming.
Awesome. So people from who couldn't make it in the all over the country can be listening to this presentation. So thank you very much.
Awesome.
One we're going to first correct, it's no BS with Jen and Jess. Just say it right.
Oh.
And two, we're excited to be here. The platform that we promote and use on LinkedIn and on YouTube is really focusing on the people side of Lean. And so we're here because we believe in Lean and what it does. There's a lot of people out there that focus on the tool part and the process part. It is important. We know that. We can't do the things we want to do without it, but we even more can't do those things without the people that are doing the tools and the processes. So Jesse and I focus a lot on the people side of Lean, talking about the culture and the environment that we're creating. Perfect segue into what we're going to talk about today. And so anything you want to say before we hand it over?
Yeah, I mean, the segue actually, the invitation to come in and moderate this conversation around mental health and mental wellness. I'm probably going to spill some of my guts today because Jennifer always makes me do that. I've struggled with it myself, and I cope with it in a very unhealthy way. There's a lot of us out there that have done that, know people that are doing that or are currently stuck in that. And so being able to come up here and have a conversation with leaders that are actively doing something to mitigate that and courageous enough to have that conversation with an audience of folks that are also open-minded and forward-thinking. It was like, this is actually our first live in-person event. So it was like double whammy, and yes, I'm on my way to Dallas. So I appreciate y'all coming in here and being here and appreciate the panel very much.
And so all of us, most of us work in the construction industry. That's what's drawing you here. And we have a problem in our industry. And whether we want to own it or not, it's there. And it is we cultivate and we foster an environment that feeds into a lot of things that we're going to talk about today. So, we want you to listen, we want you to ask questions and things like that. But I think the value here is we have 4 leaders in companies that are trying to make a change and trying to do something different. So without further ado, we're going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to pepper them with questions and then dig a little deeper. So, Matt.
I'm Matt Clark. I'm a safety, health, environmental manager for TD Industries here in Dallas. I've been in construction since '95, straight out of the Army. Been doing safety since '99. My journey with mental health is I started depression at a very young age. Never really told anybody. Attempted suicide a couple times as a teenager. Once I got into a safety role, I started giving presentations on depression and suicide on job sites, but still just kind of kept that hidden because I didn't want to admit myself that I had depression. And up until about 2 years ago, we finally started seeking help. So I've made that my platform now to try to end the silent pandemic that's affecting us.
Yeah.
Hi, Keon Zeddy, CEO of Scholars Group. I've been on my lean journey for almost 20 years now, and as our industry started to evolve and more firms have started to accept the lean way of thinking, it just makes so much sense naturally. We stop talking about process and tools and start really adding to that conversation around people's well-being, the people side. I think that took a long time for me to understand even coming up through the field. I usually ask a group of folks like yourselves, like, raise your hand if you've ever seen anybody throw their hard hat on a job site. Really, seriously, raise your hand if you've ever seen it.
I did.
Keep your hand up if you did it. So, a question I always ask is that going to be acceptable behavior for the next generation of builders? And I don't think it is, and so really appreciate all you guys coming to an event like this because it's going to be, things got to change and we got to lead the change. And so I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome, thank you. Nathan.
Nathan Howell, Vice President, Project Manager with HKS, and I co-chair our mental and behavioral health practice with my neighbor here. I'll let her introduce herself. But, we do a lot of research around the built environment and kind of the symbiotic relationship that, it has on our mental health and our well-being, both physically and mentally. You can't really separate the two, honestly. And honestly, spend way too much time inside psychiatric hospitals and with therapists that I care to admit, just doing those design projects. But, we've learned a lot about, what the built environment, that relationship really has to do with our wellness and how we interact with that, the give and take, and how that applies. But we're honestly, as an industry, we're really forward about kind of taking those principles and applying them to ourselves. Design and construction industry, very symbiotic relationships as well. We cross-pollinate a lot. We share a lot of culture. And so there's a lot of things we're going to talk a little bit more about here that I think we can do better at.
Thank you, Nathan. Rachel.
Hello, I'm Rachel Farrell. I'm a senior medical planner and co-chair of the mental and behavioral health practice at HKS. I started my journey with behavioral health after I studied architecture and graduated my master's. I have been practicing at a large firm in Dallas for about 3 years before I realized that I really wanted to pursue education for counseling and psychology. After doing a very brief stint in a clinical rotation, I learned that I would be a terrible therapist. As an empath, I think that it was just not a very good space for me. I would listen to people's stories and immediately take them on. And so going home and cooking dinner, I'd be like, oh, I really don't feel good about how that ended. I really feel like I want to go talk to that person's dad and straighten him out. But so this is a really great space for me to be where I can be a bridge between architects, designers, and then clients. I'm just really thrilled to have the opportunity and the platform, and so excited to be here with you guys today.
Thank you so much. So we're going to start with one question. Everyone's going to answer it, even you. So, and then after that, we're going to kind of pick and choose different questions for different people. But again, y'all can feed off each other. So the first question we're going to ask is, why do you think so many in our industry struggle with mental health? Jess.
So I had to think, I got a cheat sheet, right? I had the questions early. The one answer I was able to come up with as to why people struggle with mental health is because it's invisible. And when I say that, I'm thinking of my own experience with my family, my mom, my brothers. you couldn't see things building up, and also with me, we couldn't see it compounding until there was a crisis. And it was at the crisis point that maybe there's something wrong. But it took so many cycles of that for us to be able to understand and examine, like, where's it actually starting and what contributes to that. It almost always looked kind of like a disruption in flow on the job site. It's the damn plumbing. The problem started way up here, the fault happened here, and that's where we focus. So I think it's the same dynamic in terms of, for me, is it's invisible. We don't see it, we don't understand it until it's an explosion. And then that person just has poor character, or they just have poor will. They're just not strong-minded enough, and that's not the case. So we got a long way to go up there. That's not.
That's a great, I'm gonna let y'all kind of pepper it around, but what is y'all's response to that question?
Sure. I don't think the construction industry has more people with mental health issues than any other industry. Nationwide, about 1/3 of our population suffers from mental health issues. I think the construction industry is a high-stress environment, and so it tends to be recognized a little bit more through our suicide rates, right? So, depending on what facts and figures you look at, suicide's 1, 2, or 3 of the occupational suicide rates, and that changes year by year. But we're always up there with police, fire, military, because those are high-stress environments. Construction is still dominated by mostly alpha male men, so there's a lot of butting heads out there, a lot of high tension. Everybody's always under stress. I've never had an owner of a project come up to us and say, "Hey, y'all are doing a great job. Let me give you a few more months on your schedule." So we're always behind the gun. You travel a lot, so we're away from our core support groups, and so all that manifests itself into additional stresses. And so if you're one of those 1/3 of people that are suffering, that's just more that your body has to take on and deal with.
I have a lot of the same, I feel like our industry is not well in general. And, some statistics I was looking at is like by sector, we are in the top 1, 2, or 3 for heavy drinking. We have a drinking culture in our industry. We drink when we celebrate, we drink, we lose a job. Hell, if we just get together, sometimes we're just going to drink. Yeah, usually drink. We're number 1, 2, or 3 in substance abuse. Number 1 in pain relievers. And you start thinking about just wellness in general. 1 every 25 construction workers have cardiovascular disease. 1 in 4 is obese. 1 in 4 uses tobacco. 1 in 4 uses pain relievers. A lot of these things are ways to cope. It's us pouring into something else to not deal with the fact that we've got a little bit of a hyper-masculine industry. We're not going to come into a job site, start talking about our problems. We've got to, in our history, we just leave that kind of stuff at the gate. So, not to follow on what Matt was saying, but we do work long hours. We have workers that travel, and that travel leads to isolation sometimes for being on the road. We have that constant pressure on schedule, budget, quality that is relentless and never ends. As you finish one job, and it's the same set of problems that demands on the next. And so I think all those kind of things can lead to anxiety and depression because we're an industry that traditionally has not spent much time even understanding what that is. We just bury it. You just bury it and bury it until it explodes. And I've seen it, experienced it, and I think that's really what's playing.
So along the lines of this substance abuse culture, what are some awesome, innovative ideas that you've seen in play or even just thought about with regard to mitigating that, the reinforcing behavior that feeds into it's okay, let's go do it?
That's a really good question. You're talking about just in general?
Just in general.
Well, it's a tough one, right? Because, you think about a lot of the things we have in our industry, like a topping out party, things like that. Traditionally, used to go and get a couple cases of beer and right there at the top and out, crack into it. And so, I don't know. It's one of those kind of things where I think for a lot of us, we're still trying to figure that out because it wouldn't be normal to go to certain functions or events and not have alcohol.
Yeah, I think that's an industry thing. It was not too long ago that I was told that I wouldn't be promoted unless I started going out to the happy hours because I wasn't part of the team, right? I have a decision of myself. I just don't drink anymore, and so I'm like, okay, well, I guess I don't get promoted then, right? I'm not going to go and let go of my values just to try to blend in, right? So companies need to accept that and try to plan non-alcohol functions, right? So.
I always feel that that's really like an interesting and kind of sad part of our culture as a piece of the AEC group, just because we're wildly creative and there are so many other opportunities that we have to like celebrate wins and celebrate our team members. Why is it that we always land on like going out for drinks? There's a zillion other things that we can do.
But, I mean, I love what you guys are saying, and I agree completely. As far as our industry, we don't struggle any more than any other group in the United States, honestly. Everybody deals with mental health, it's a spectrum. We're all somewhere on that spectrum, towards illness or towards wellness. Every single person struggles, it is a high stress environment, both on design and construction. It's extremely stressful, budgets, out the wazoo these days. Schedules are tighter and tighter. Everybody wants it faster and faster. And, there's a lot of stress that goes around. And really our best defense against mental illness is resiliency. So if you think about that in the building term, right, we talk about resiliency in buildings and how, we design for disaster resilience. It's a system approach. It's not one thing that's going to defend against a disaster. It's a system of things. It's redundancy. It's a symbiotic piece. And so we have to think about that as ourselves as well. In mental wellness and resiliency is not dependent on just us. It's a systems approach, and those around us are relationships, are connections. And unfortunately, our industry, we travel constantly. Late nights, we're cut off from a lot of these things that are traditional kind of networks that really guard against that mental illness kind of portion, right? So we're away from our families, we're away from our friends, we're isolated a lot of the times under high stress, high pressure, traumatic events, things happen, and then something snaps. So, how do we change that dynamic? And then when we do that, we cope by drinking or turning to substance. And that's our individual coping mechanism because we don't have that support system that we need through our industry, through our companies, through our friends, families, etc.
So I want to add, because I'm all hitting everything. So we talked about bravado, we talked about late nights, we talked about camaraderie, we talked about those networks of people. For me, the reason is we promote and celebrate and elevate people that get there early and stay late, that push, that hit those marks, that do everything that they have to do to get it done. We promote them and we celebrate them. Okay? And again, we're going to go, what does that have to do with mental illness? What does that have to do with drinking and all that stuff? It's because those are the people that are the managers in charge. Those are the people that are in charge of our jobs. And we push them, and you know what? They push. And when people get pushed, like Jess said, when you get pushed to a point, you're going to explode. And we don't stop and we don't think about, by doing all that pushing, there's going to be a point where they've got to figure out how to deal with that, cope with that. And when they are on the road and they are away from their families, the only people they have are who? The other people on the job. And if there's one person on the job pushing, guess what? Everyone else is getting pushed. And then where do they have to go when they leave the job site? Somewhere to hopefully cope with it to be able to show up the next day. And that's our industry. And the bravado and the empowering of those people that now can, we have to have these conversations. We have to push it because now and Keon said it, this next generation isn't going to accept it. There's not. They're just going to go, if that's how somebody treats them, but before that's been our industry, you're like, you got to suck it up, get up, that's the level you're at. They don't do that anymore. They have to go, peace out, I'm gone. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to get out of this industry. And so if we want to keep people in our industry and get people into this industry, because we have so many jobs that are unfilled right now, So we're gonna have to make a change. And you know what? One person isn't gonna change an industry, but one person can help a group of people. And then that group of people is they're gonna impact other people in their firms. And these conversations, we have to continue to have them and push them and elevate them and not reward that type of behavior because they're gonna continue doing it. I mean, these are the conversations that we have to have. So again, we already answered some of these, but I want to ask this question because if somebody has the answer, I want to make sure that we hit it. Why do you think people in the construction industry don't feel comfortable talking about mental health? So we've kind of touched around it, but did we have any specific answers to that? Why do we not feel comfortable?
Again, it's the usually you said hypermasculinity. I've taught leadership classes for years, and I've told our supervisors, you know, you have to be there for them. You have to be their counselor. You have to ask them questions, right? And, you know, I walked up on a foreman who's literally yelling at one of the workers, and hey, what's going on? I was like, man, this dude ain't doing nothing today. I'm sitting home for the day. And I was like, well, what's going on with him? He's like, he ain't working. I was like, okay, but what's going on with him, right? There's a reason, right? He's good worker. He's been a good worker for the past couple of years. Today, he's got something going on. It's not, hey, you need to get out of here. It's, how can we help you? And I was flat out told, I ain't no counselor. I ain't doing that. It's like, okay, so we got to break those doors down. I think the more conversations like this that we have, where more people start to get it, and more people start to normalize it, the better it'll be. But until it's prevalent where people are talking about it, it's still going to be a big barrier.
Matt, you mentioned earlier that you're a big advocate and you give us a lot of intimate details of your experience now. What I took from it was there was a period of time where you would speak about it to a point before you started talking about your experience with depression and suicide, etc. What helped you make the leap?
Yeah, so 2019 was a really, really rough year for me, and no reason for that whatsoever. By the way, I grew up in a picture-perfect family, right? My parents were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary next week. You know, got one brother, one sister, so parents, 3 kids, 2 dogs, right? My dad was a deacon in the church. I mean, we played ball, everything that you would picture, you know, Norman Rockwell family, that was us. And so there's zero reason for me to have depression. It's a medical condition, right? So that's one thing I want to make clear to everybody. It's not something that you can just wish it goes away and it goes away. It's a medical issue in the head. And I just never wanted to admit that I was depressed. I never wanted to admit that I was too weak to move past that, right? 2019, really rough year for me. Again, no reason whatsoever. This year I'm celebrating my 25th anniversary with my wife. We got a kid, 2 dogs, a pig, which is huge, some other pets, but I mean, we have a perfect family as well, and so there's no reason for me to be depressed anymore, but still I'm having this constant issue, and it was getting to the point where I was having recurring suicidal thoughts again. And so, you know, I got a son and don't want him to grow up without a dad, so I went to my doctor, had the conversation really for my son's sake. Got put on medications, and that has been an absolute game changer for me. So I've done a talk on my job site for like the past 15 years or so, and I've literally had superintendents at the end of the toolbox talk saying, why are we talking about this out here? It's like, because it's prevalent, dude. We got to talk about it, right? These people need to hear that stuff. Like, this is a safety meeting. We talk about safety. It's like, this is safety. And so, but you're right. I was essentially living a lie, right? I'm up here talking about, hey, you got to speak up, you got to speak out. And I wasn't doing that myself. In September, I started with a new company, and they asked me to do a little presentation at one of the next all-hands meetings. And so I was like, hey, do you mind if I talk about mental health? I've been doing this for quite some time now. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So I got up there, and it was the first time that I did it to other people, other than my doctor, 2 months before that I had attempted suicide. And it was very freeing, but it was extremely terrifying at the same time, right? As a group of, 150 people that I've literally just met, and I'm getting up in front of them to tell them that I suffer from depression, I'm on pills, and I'm suicidal, by the way, right? So, but it went over like gangbusters, and I had numerous people walk up to me and ask for our EAP phone number after that. So that's kind of how I've transitioned into just here it is, this is what I deal with. If you're dealing with it, we can help, right? Like, don't suffer in silence.
And I feel like we both have started to kind of touch on this, but there has been a massive kind of change in the paradigm between kind of the older generation absolutely not talking about things like this, and the newer that is like baseline expectation, we're going to be transparent, it's going to be part of the conversation. And I feel like we mentioned like this is safety because there's psychological safety in building a space that is open and available for those harder conversations. Like we want to be there for our staff, we want teams to be successful, but if it means having the hard conversations, that's what it takes.
Well, and it directly correlates to safety. They say that people suffer from depression are 41% more likely to have an unintentional injury, right? Have an accident, whether that be at work or at home. So, you know, if your goal is to reduce those on-the-job incidents and keep people safe, well, hey, here's a chunk. Got to address every bit of it.
The only thing I'll add too, because this is all super rich, if I'm asked like, why don't we feel comfortable talking about it? For me personally, it's vulnerability. I mean, the way I grew up, the way I came up in the industry is like vulnerability is weakness. And so if you start to expose yourself to people, people will talk about you, people use it against you, and so you don't talk about it. And I know you guys talk a lot about that. And that's a journey for everybody. And I hate even being up here, like even in the last conversation, like we got this figured out. None of us on this panel got this figured out. This is something that we deal with ourselves all the time, and it's just that's going to be a hard conversation that we need to continue to have as we move forward with this, because if people don't feel like the environment is safe to even share, they're not going to. I always say, some of our guys, if somebody even has an idea in a meeting, and you volleyball spike that idea, like it's the dumbest thing you've ever heard, you think next time you ask for an idea, it's going to come? Now take that and make it be somebody trying to share something about what's going on at home and why they're late. If it's not tolerated, no one's going to share it. And so we got to get that.
Rachel, you mentioned psychological safety, which I have a tattoo of that way, like on the left side of the ribs. What are some elements of a psychologically safe space? Like Keon just talked about, people got to feel okay. There's some things that are necessary to facilitate that, to make that happen. Anything come to mind right away?
I think just being available for very transparent conversations. I think you were speaking to like if somebody has a history of kind of rejecting or not tolerating certain ideas, it doesn't give you the interpersonal autonomy that you feel you can come up with things like either innovations that will push the industry forward or things that are deeply personal that are hard to like speak to, because I think we all have a tendency towards self-preservation, especially when it comes to our professional lives, when we're all trying to like hustle, and there's this kind of romanticized thing in our industry about the hustle and how we want to like really, it's almost like a badge of honor when we're like, oh wait, did you stay up? How much caffeine did you consume today? But like, that's not good. It's not good. It might be like fun to joke about, but I think that, as we build space where, we're pressing in and meeting about how we can push projects forward, we also need to kind of push in the opposite direction and be like, I noticed when I was on at 8 o'clock last night, you were also on last night, and like really push back on the bad behaviors that are maybe not the ones that HR is going to come after you for, but we can just start to encourage people to go back into their communities and families and get rest and celebrate that as well.
It's a weird flex to say how much time you spend away from your family.
Yeah.
You say that. I've on the job site, I've heard conversations about people who miss births of their children.
Yeah.
These, I mean, as like.
Yeah.
The ridicule, right? Like, what do you mean you're going to leave to go to take? You ain't having the baby?
Oh, yeah.
I've said that
Yeah,
a long time ago, but that's the mentality. What are you going to do? Fool? We got work to do. What about, so many of me, I lacked the capability to empathize with people. People call, something's going really bad. Jess, I'm going to be late. And then they show up, they couple minutes late, and it was like actually 7:09. Like, that's more than a couple. 7:02 is a couple. Now, I'm sorry I'm late. Like, don't be sorry, be on time, right? Like, so no empathy, no time to listen or understand or give somebody the space to say X, Y, Z. I don't know how I got there, but clearly I was lacking some capabilities and skills to empathize and create that space to at least understand what the hell's going on with this human being. What are some ways that y'all would recommend for people to build these types of capabilities, to listen, to connect, and to accept the whole person?
Thank you about that. I don't know if that was part of the
Probably
question.
none of his.
Other questions?
Now we're going, here we go.
Open conversation.
You know, you mentioned like you were an empath, and probably a couple years ago, I wouldn't even know what that meant. But we started doing like personality profile assessments, and what I've recognized is like there are certain people that naturally care very deeply about other people, and then there's certain people that are just missing that muscle completely. I think about it as a muscle because it's something that I would go into a meeting and not even think to ask somebody like how their day's going, how their weekend went, and then especially if I'm going to a meeting because I'm frustrated about something, like I'm in one track mind. And what I've noticed is like, yeah, once you realize the reason that work product wasn't done right, or what somebody just went through this and that, realizing it too late is it's still too late. The damage is done. And so it's a cognizant shift. It's a muscle memory. Like this is a muscle that on the weekend, like I gotta make sure. So every time I go into a meeting or to start talking to somebody new for the first time that day, like I try not to jump in right into the thing that I want to talk about. And I'm not perfect at it, but just that couple second pause just to check. You know, we started doing internal meetings. You know, for our job site teams and our leadership meetings where you have to go around the room talking about like a business or personal, best or worst. And that kind of sets the tone. Somebody's coming off, hey, my grandmother's in the hospital, this and that. Going into the meeting like that, and you know to have some empathy for this person as you're communicating. Just little shifts like that is going to game changer.
We also have to like change our lens and stop looking at people as assets and start looking at people as students and just trying to understand like how we're going to build our teams. I think we're doing a lot better more recently about, you know, understanding the team's structure in terms of what they are bringing with their strengths and how they communicate, because we don't all communicate the same way. I think that what makes each person on the team unique is beautiful, and I think that there has been a large part of that has been either pushed aside historically, but I think that the more that we can really understand how everyone kind of works and operates and try to work around those nuances, the better we'll be.
I didn't know what an empath was until I watched Guardians of the Galaxy. So there's lots of, you know, I'm all about constant knowledge gain, right? So there's lots of different classes you can take in order to help with that. Crucial conversations, heart styles is an excellent class. Anybody's never taken a heart styles course, it's extremely disruptive to your personal being, but teaches you quite a bit about how you get to talk to others. Don't send the form out to your family because they're very brutal on what they'll answer about you. Mental health first aid is a great course. There's lots of things that you can take to help build it. Yeah.
So, Rachel, you said this, you said we gotta treat humans like humans. And so Jesse and I've talked about this before, is in our industry, when we see somebody, we don't see them as a person, we see them as what they can contribute, what the outcome will be because of them. Think about that. So if we see a mechanical person, we see a plumber, we see, okay, this is what they are contributing, so their value to this project is this. Like, really? Like, this is a human being that showed up at work and that has to go home. And the value they're bringing to us in our projects are the outcomes that they can produce. That's how we look at people. That's how we look at people. We don't stop and go, okay, that person left the house this morning. We don't know what happened last night. We don't know what happened the night before. We don't know what happened this morning. We don't know about their car. We don't know about their kids. We don't know anything. They show up to work with whatever they have on them, and they are there to do a job. And all these the outcomes they produce. We don't stop and think about we weren't part of any of that stuff before they showed up. Same thing, I know all of us have families that we go home to. How many times do we go home with all the stuff that we carry from that job, all of our pushes and pulls and all the stuff that stresses, we leave and we go home. How many people here go home and that person that you're walking home to knows everything you dealt with that day? But we've got to stop and think about those things. The people we're dealing with are people and they're humans, and they're not a part of those other places. We say work-life balance. How many people have said we need a work-life balance? How many people have said that? Raise your hand. Is work not life? Is work not life? So how does that even make sense? How do we have a work and a life balance? So we have life, then we got to go to work. Then we leave work and we go back to our life. Like it's not a work-life balance. We got to stop using that. Okay, whether it's home life or homework, whatever it is, we've got to stop balancing. We've got to do this, and we have a mentality that we have to focus here, and then we get to leave and be a normal person. Then we got to get back into this. We got to stop using the terminology like that if that's not what we want to create. So,
I didn't take that step.
do it. Do it.
Since we're so far.
Yeah. I'm looking at your
I mean,
notes.
you kind of knew that was
I
going to
don't even
happen.
know
Come on. You kind of knew.
My personal experience, I'm being vulnerable here, like, I'd much rather deal with work problems than life problems. So to me, work-life balance is like, oh, the life stuff, like, man, that's messy. I don't want to deal with that. I'd rather focus my time on the work stuff, which, I think I'm not the only one. And I think a lot of us in our industry, the reason we work so hard is that even with all the variables in our industry, we got control. And outside of work, sometimes we don't have control. And I think that's part of the conversation just as much.
Absolutely.
That's a question for the audience, like another one of those raise your hand moments. How many folks out there, when stuff gets really hairy at home, all of a sudden you get super focused on work or some brand new project? I gotta say something else.
Or the wife say, hey, one time, you gotta fly out.
You're just letting me know.
Really, going back to work,
See, I mean, that's really, where our industry really can do better. And where our leaderships, where core leaders in our value structure can really change for the better. If we value humans as humans, and we understand that we're not machines, and we're not just this efficient worker bee that can just do this one thing on end without any break or any respite or anything else. When we have empathy for those people and we really see people for who they are, we give space for them to be human, for them to deal with those things that aren't necessarily work related. If we enable them to thrive in the whole of their life, how much more can they really contribute? How much more innovation can they bring? There's data there that supports that. When people are thriving and healthy, both mentally and physically, they're much more innovative, much more creative. They can do a whole lot more, and frankly, less time. And when we have an entire team that works cohesively together because they've built those relational bonds and have that kind of defense against mental illness, and we can foster that in our companies, how much more can we do? How much more profitable can we really be? That's not the root goal. We really want to aim at the people, but the side effect is we are more profitable, we are more productive. So, you really can't have one without the other.
On profitability, Blue Cross Blue Shield says that mental health is going to cost our economy about $550 billion with a B dollars this year. About 90% of that is directly absorbed by our companies because about half of that 90%, about 45% of that is lost productivity and decreased productivity, lost work days, right? The other 45% of that is the medical expenses. Well, pretty much all of us work for companies now that have these high deductible consumer-driven plans, right? And so we're essentially self-insured, and so that 45% of that is coming directly out of our company's pockets. Right? So talk about profit, that's a lot.
So I have a question for y'all. I know it kind of goes to one of our questions, so you probably have a little bit of pro. But what can we do as people in the construction industry, as professionals, as people, as leaders? What can we do to help people feel comfortable or feel like they can share or create the environment that will foster more people knowing it's okay?
I have to start, I think you got to normalize the conversation, so you got to talk about it. You know, from a business perspective, you go back 10 years ago, and even some firms today, like, you even saying the word suicide in a company setting, or putting it in an email or something like that is a no-no, HR no-no, you know? And so one, you gotta normalize that kind of conversation. There's a lot of ways how to do that. But I want to share two stories. Like, so two of the partners at in our firm, Skiles Group. One of them's daughter tried to commit suicide when she was 14, and then the other one's son committed suicide at 24. And they didn't have the need. They could have kept some of that information private, especially the attempt to get that within the family, which the way I came up, like, you keep stuff, you don't share that kind of stuff. But having leadership share those experiences with the company, the pain they were going through, normalizing the conversation of what that was around, really, I think, helped so many other people in the company that may not have been going exactly through the same thing, but at least similar type things, really feel vulnerable enough to share their own stories and start the conversation. And I think, I don't think you have to have that type of something that severe for leadership to share to start that, but we all have enough stuff going on that, if you can find yourself vulnerable enough to share it, that starts the flame. That's the flame that starts the trend.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that hits most people well, hey, real quick, show of hands. How many people know somebody that's died by suicide? So statistics say about 50% of it, but probably real close to this room. How many of you would have thought that all those hands were going to be raised just now, right? We tend to, whenever somebody dies by suicide, we tend to kind of internalize that. It's like, I don't want to tell everybody what's going on. We self-embarrass because of it. But first off, we got to get past that, right? Because suicide is a condition from mental issues, right? A normal person in a normal state of mind doesn't kill themselves unless they're, going to prison for whatever, for something really wacky, right? But most people aren't going to end their life unless they have some type of mental health issue. And so we need to get past that fact of, hey, they committed suicide. That was selfish. They didn't commit suicide. They died from depression, right? They died from a mental health issue. Suicide was the way that it happened. We don't blame people that died from cancer. We don't blame people that died from heart attacks. We need to get past that, suicide stigma and understand that they died from it, right? It's important to have those conversations, right? We got to get more people talking about it. But what can we do? How many people in here have an employee assistance program with your companies? Some of you are asking questions to your coworkers. Some of you are very confused, right? I guarantee you that most probably almost everybody in here has an EAP. How many people know the phone number for your EAP? Perfect. So I have a program in my phone, right? I give these talks, people come up, they're like, hey, you mentioned the EAP, what's that phone number? Whip it out right there on the spot, right? AirDrop it to them, text it to them, whatever you gotta do. Because if they're asking for the help in that moment, they're probably not gonna ask a second time. If they get the courage to speak up once and you don't help them immediately, they're probably not gonna come back a second time. we still have that stigma that mental health is weakness, right? And so especially on a construction site, a lot of people are scared to admit it, right? They don't want to have that vulnerability. So we need to put signs up for your EAP. We need to put signs up for, suicide hotlines, all these different things we have, but you need to put them where they can feel safe reading those. So go into the porta johns and put those signs up. If you have it sitting right there on a wall in the middle of a construction site, I guarantee you there's not one single construction worker that's going to walk over there and start taking notes off of it, right? Because he's going to get ostracized by his teammates later on. So we got to find those ways to make it a safe space. We need to have the conversations, have them often. We need to have the resources available to give them as soon as they ask for it. And we need to provide them safety to feel safe whenever they're seeking help.
I think, so the combination of what you and Keon mentioned, this one's gonna be fun, right? We've got to demonstrate the behaviors that we're seeking, physical leadership. And so I'm gonna go to the panel first, and y'all get ready, it's coming to you next. How many of you have a therapist or have accessed professional help to manage and deal with your stuff? You two? So half of us. Is that comfortable? To even be asked that question? Audience? Okay. And so the exercise is this. We're talking about creating this psychologically safe space. I have a therapist. I've had therapists for about 6 years. 5 of those years was mandated by the state of Texas. Right? Like I wasn't going to do it. They made me do it, or I was going to, have a nice cool vacation. Now I invest in myself and get me a therapist to keep me going. And so similar to what you've done, right? Talking about your experience with suicide attempts. Why is that a scary, shy thing? Because I can tell you a bunch of foolish stories and stuff that I've done with pride. Patrick's probably been a witness to a couple of them. But when it comes to, I have a therapist because I need a therapist so I don't get off the rails. I'm being a little hesitant. Did y'all notice this round of hand raising? Earlier it was like this. This round is right? So the point of that is, how do we demonstrate those behaviors and talk about, I'm a human being, and I use these resources so that I can stay sane and healthy. Well, talk about working out, fishing, yeah. You get a golf coach, yeah. You got a therapist? I need that for. Yeah, you're right, go get better golfing. Sorry.
No, I want to add to that just because Keon said it earlier, we have to normalize it. And so Jesse and I, our platform, when we started figuring out, we kind of wanted to go out there and have these tough conversations, these uncomfortable conversations. We realized that we were going to be in the minority. We realized that there was going to be a lot of people that would probably watch and sit back and go, they're crazy. But we had to make a commitment very early and adamant across the board. We were going to go in, okay, we were going to take the armor off, and we were going to be vulnerable. And that's all we can do. That's all we can control. We can control nothing else. But what we realized is when we did it, when we exhibited behaviors that we wanted to see, people started showing up. People started taking their armor off. Because all of a sudden the environment and the space that was being created was safe. And it was something that they were needing and they were looking for. And it was, they weren't getting attacked. They weren't getting worried about if they raised their hand or not. There was none of that in the space that was created. And again, I think part of the reason why we're excited about being able to be up here and talk about this is that's our space. Like we're saying it's, our space, but it's all of our space. It's our spaces. And Jesse asked the question, are we exhibiting the behaviors? Are we normalizing these conversations enough to where people aren't scared to talk about it? Are you taking off your armor so that if someone else feels safe? When he says, when Matt said, we're talking about it, they came up and they said, man, thanks for talking about that. Can you give me this or can you ask? He took his armor off and someone else went, oh, it's okay. And then they were able to then go and ask for help. How many people here, raise your hand again if you know somebody that died of suicide. Raise your hand. How many of those people someone went, oh, I already knew he was gonna die of suicide. How many of those people knew somebody was gonna kill themselves? How many times do you hear, man, I didn't even think about that. I wish I would have thought about that earlier. I wish I could have helped her. How many of those conversations do we have?
The vast majority of suicides.
Because we don't ever talk about it until it's like, oh man, we could have, whatever. And then we wonder why this is some weird, uncomfortable topic. If it's normalized and we talk about it, then all of a sudden somebody that maybe in their mind are thinking about it, all of a sudden it's okay to say something before they make a decision that they can't take that. Oh my gosh, you can say whatever you want.
So I did not raise my hand for seeking a therapist, right? I've got tons of mental issues, but I'm a very much an introvert. I know a lot of people would never guess that about me, but I am truly an introvert. I have no problem getting in front of a group and just spouting out, right? But to have those intimate conversations for me isn't real pleasurable for me. There's 5 different love languages. If nobody's ever looked at the love languages, I'm going to say that's your homework today, is to go home, figure out what your love language is, and figure out what your spouse's love language is, because they're probably different, right? And so with that, you need to figure out what type of help the person needs. It's real easy to offer support to somebody, but we tend to offer our support instead of their support, right? My love language is affection, right? My wife's is communication. So when I have an issue going on, she wants to bombard me with question after question after question. And to me, it just feels like I'm almost being attacked. Whereas I want her to just sit next to me and put her head on my shoulder, right? And that kind of works out everything for me. I know hers is communication, so whenever she's having an issue, I ask her all those questions, right? And she enjoys that. So, but you got to figure out what type of support someone else needs and give them their support and not your support, right? So that's the first point on that. The second point is I totally forgot because I just spent so much time on the first point. So.
Bring it back. Matt mentioned support and resources. What are some best practices that you're aware of for enterprises, companies, and people to access and leverage around mental health?
So, I mean, there's lots of things. You mentioned employee assistance programs. If your company has one, great. There's others out there, and I think we'll have some links for people after this as well. For those here locally, recognizingrise.org is a website through the Tarrant County Mental Health Connection. I sit on their committee for that, but it's really about trauma-informed care. So there's resources on there. There's other websites available. You can go take some self-assessments on your own, watch some videos. Really, just you're not alone. I think we can't say that enough. We're all dealing with this. Every one of us. We all deal with different aspects of it through our lives. We're up and down. It's a spectrum. So making those connections, building that resiliency between everything. And then honestly, as a company, what kind of policies do we have in place? Do we have adequate sick time? Do you have mental health days available at your company that employees can use and take? Do we give opportunity to be flexible in those things? Men and women's healthcare needs are drastically different. That's a huge topic right now in our country in particular. Do we give flexibility for those unique needs for our employees to deal with in their own way, and for our company to support them? Peer support groups, there's tons of those out there. NAMI is one of the national leader in that. There's others around. Black Space for the Black community is a great resource and a great model. You don't have to go to a therapist. Sometimes just connecting with others who are dealing with similar things or have dealt with a similar thing is enough. Just to have that connection and say, you're not alone. Just to give space for that is a great place to start.
Yeah, go ahead. There's lots of others out there. CIASP is probably the biggest one for our industry. It's the construction industry for the suicide. Yeah, Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. Sorry, CIASP.org. They have tons and tons of information out there. The suicide hotline, 1-800-273-TALK. There's free text counseling that anybody can access. You can text just one single word, help, talk, whatever you want to put. You can text that to 741-741 and you get free text counseling, so if you don't want to actually call somebody, you can do that. I think it's important though that we have those resources available to give to others that are asking, right? So, I got an iPhone. In my notes, I have a lot of these things in there, so when somebody asks for it, if they got an iPhone, I can just airdrop it right there to them. Just open up that note, airdrop it to them, and they get a list of like 20 different things. If they don't have an iPhone, they should.
I guess a general question for the topic today, and that was, as an industry, and as we hopefully get away from the pandemic, obviously the design construction industry, of course, is a very competitive and very, very stressful industry under normal times. And when you overlay the pandemic and all the additional stress that that imposes on individuals and companies and deadlines and everybody involved, as an industry, I know, Matt, you were involved in our projects at Parkland. Obviously, everyone was making up what we were going to do in terms of responses to the job site itself. Dallas County was making up rules on a daily basis on what we needed to do, and you had the federal government making up their minds every day, and things were changing. But as an industry, from a construction management, the CMs that were managing their jobs, the trades that were trying to organize their teams, how, from a mental health perspective, how does the industry respond to the pandemic? As an industry, to deal with, that additional layer of stress, on both running a construction company and those stresses and those trades, and how do you get to those individuals and keep them from, losing.
I think there's a lot of good depth in that question. To summarize, I think what I heard is kind of like, what can leadership do around all those things? And so we've been on this journey for probably 4 years now. I think the first thing for us was, we made a cultural decision within the firm that we were going to talk about mental health, and no one was going to be shamed for talking about mental health. So that was the first thing. It was a cultural shift that this is going to be a part of what we do, just like everything else that we value. Mm-hmm. And then, I made some notes on some of the things we've done, and I'm not saying that your firms should go and do these things right away, but it's a journey, and step by step. And so one of the first things we did, was we started a committee. We call it our stigma-free group, and that group brings in licensed professionals. We do webinars where it's quite, where we can talk to people as a group to talk about some of these issues. We do peer groups. And as that started evolving, we had a lot of traction. We started having training put up, and then finally, leadership made a decision that we were going to make sure that all therapy services, things like that, would be 100% covered, unlimited for our people. And so that was then, okay, now we're putting our money where our mouth was. This past year, we decided to go to a basically unlimited vacation policy. Again, noticing the burnout and fatigue through COVID and what that's done. And, I think, for years and years on the lean side of things, the consultant would come tell you, oh, you want to save 10% of your operating expense, well, implement these lean tools and practices. I think the way to look at things nowadays is like, hey, if your people are valued and they're rested and they're passionate about what they're doing and they're not burnt out, guess what? That mixed in with, having a good culture that cares about people, you'll probably save 10% and make some of those bottom line figures. And so things like that, like I said, I think there's a couple more The safety moments you talked about, we do that quite a bit, especially on the toolbox talk side of things. I'll tell you, our safety director shared numerous stories with me where whenever we've done one on mental health or suicide prevention, that somebody has come up to him at the end who is either going through something or their friend is and like found value. And I really like your thing about having that information. If you don't mind, I got it on my phone. But I think those are like 6-7 steps
The way
over time.
Matt ran his safety, his morning safety was really, really awesome. I think with that number of people on our job site was truly remarkable. And, I think for a job that size, it's definitely expected, but it all needs to be scalable too. It's equally important. If you're doing a small renovation job, it's equally important to, have a scalable, reach a scalable product as well.
Yeah, I think for the companies, doing something is the start, right? Every company's gonna be different in their journey to get there. They just have to start with something, right? So it may not be unlimited vacation. That would be awesome. But just get those conversations out there more and more. It is a great start for it.
Well, and I want to touch on the stress side of that a little bit too, because, I can't understate how important it is to really understand how detrimental stress is. There was a study done a couple of years back, actually on medical residents who were notorious for extremely long hours, high stress environments during those few years of their residency. And they actually measured their DNA during that time period. And the telomeres, which is, think of it kind of like a fuse on the end of your DNA, which shrinks over the period of your life. Kind of think a little bit of the life fuse. It shrinks drastically faster under high stress conditions. So we are literally shortening our lives under these extreme stress environments. Everybody's going to experience a trauma of some sort, an adverse event during life, probably a couple. And there's actually studies done on children that when they experience 3 or more traumatic events during childhood, their likelihood of developing mental illness in adolescence and adulthood is extremely higher. Just 3. So, that can range from any number of things. And just think of all the stressing events that the kids go through these days. So building that resiliency and that defense against stress, against those traumatic events, even when we get to adulthood, we supposedly have that baseline level of defense and resiliency. Build those connections. Things still get out of control. We still have traumatic, stressful events. We talk about projects. What if there's a catastrophic event on a project? People die. Part of the structure falls. Things happen. And that is a horrific event. That the stress that team, think of the project manager, the superintendent in an instance like that. That's extreme. So, but stress is honestly partly a fear-based response in our biological setup, right? We're scared that we're alone in this. We don't have this covered. It's out of control. But if we built an environment and a team culture that says, hey, we've got your back, we're supporting you, and we're going to help you through this, and things like what Keon's talking about, phenomenal start, by the way. Those are amazing policies. But how much better can we support our teams and reduce that stress level and increase the level of health for our teams? So that's really the question.
And I just want to add, again, we hit on a lot of things that I think is good. When we think we are alone in something, we are not going to make a decision to say something, which that's just how we've grown up. And so how many of you, and you mentioned it, I'm sure you're going to raise your hand, I think, but how many of us in our safety meetings bring cardiovascular doctors, bring doctors that deal with diabetes, bring cancer doctors that deal with skin melanomas? How many of those people are coming and talking to your group of construction people that may not have that access anywhere else? other than dehydration. You know, when you get a stroke, here's the symptoms. How many of you have those people speaking at your toolbox talks and at your safety meetings? I mean, we're a healthcare general contractor, so for us it's easier because we're already working for the people that have all of those resources there. And again, you don't have to bombard them, but that may be the only place they hear that here's the symptoms for having a stroke. Here's the symptoms for you need to go get that checked out. Here's the symptoms for you need to drink more water. That may be the only time they hear it. And guess what? Everybody else goes same to me. So everybody's there. But like, and you can mix it up with other things, but like that is a prime opportunity to be able to hit everybody on your job site with knowledge that will help their well-being. And you know what? It may not help them, but they may go home and go, man, let me tell you what happened today at work, and it may impact their families. So like, I know that makes things, those are some things we do, mainly because we're in the healthcare industry, but those are things to think about, that it's not just what we're doing here, but there's a bridge there. We're supporting and we're helping build these amazing facilities. There's never been an owner or a client or a business that says, we don't want to talk about that. That's not important. We just need you to build that. No one's going to say that because they know it's important. And these are the people that are building their facility. They're even more, they want to help them. They want to help them have a better life. So just think about that when you're thinking about those safety topics. How many people have more than just on-site safety topics at their safety meetings? Raise your hand. Okay, we're getting told. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, Nathan, you brought up a point around connecting with people, right? Just saying, am I alone? I've got this thing I'm wrestling with, etc. This is what I got. And so another observation I've been able to make, and by the way, Keon, like, you don't want to just throw away all the consultants. Some of them are really cool. But what I've been able to observe is as we come up through our career, the volume of peers that we have decreases. You start traveling up that org chart. How many peers you got, Keon? Right? Like, so as that continues to go, so everybody in here has progressed throughout their career. And that group of peers that you could relate to, like automatic, like you get off the phone and you're like, yeah, I know. Who was it? Yeah, I know. The number of people that you can share that with diminishes. Is that fair? What do you do to build that network? Everybody here in the room has that same problem. What are you actively doing to build that connectivity or maintain the connectivity as we grow and maybe diminish the people or the connections that we've had previously because now we have different responsibilities to the organization? What could we do to make that happen? I mean, one beautiful thing, Buddy's mentioned it, Jim, we've talked about it in the No BS tribe, the lean community is a bunch of competitors sharing like their human experience with running work, and dealing with trade partners, and dealing with GCs, etc. Like there's so much damn work out there. What are we worried about? What are you going to lose by forming a relationship with your peer from a competitor? What are you going to get? Right? That's the inverse of it. It's the connectivity of what we need as human beings because we are social creatures. There's a little preachy there. Keon, question. Yeah, well, I got a question now.
Oh, we're done. The questions are.
Are you sure? I think we'll answer number one.
Okay, that's what.
We got half, we're set, we got half.
So I know a deviant guy who used to work for TD Industries that had an amazing program where we could we would get a lot of vacation, we could donate it to like this pot, right? And other people could access it.
TD Cares.
TD Cares, thank you. And so this guy, what he would do, because he was a workaholic, would just not use his vacation and donate it. And it made him feel good, but reinforce this negative behavior. Because this guy would just burn out all the time. So with this unlimited vacation, what systems are y'all evaluating to ensure that people actually use that?
Well, I'm glad you bring this up, because especially I got some guys here that, the big reason it came out was a couple years ago. So I used to get asked all the time, can I roll over vacation or can I get paid for it? And the answer was always no, but it was no because I had done a ton of research that showed if you pay people for unused vacation or let them roll it over, they won't use it. And then they eventually will burn out.
Yep.
And then, so by paying people or by letting them roll it, like you're incentivizing them not to use it. And then because of that, like, then what does that do? If they're a family at home. So we had a deal a couple years back where we sent out a reminder near the end of the year that was like, use it or lose it. And the intent was like, hey, use it, don't forget. The way it was perceived was, well, shit, I went this whole year, I hadn't used it, now I can't get it in. Now all the young guys are taking theirs, they're gone, they're leaving us. And so because of that and the backlash from that and the feedback, started looking into like, well, what are some of these other industries doing? And outside of AEC, like this is actually a pretty common thing. So I remember I asked Clay, who was our CEO, was chairman of TechSo, which is our agency organization. I was like, hey, go bring it to the TechSo board and see what they think about it. And as soon as he brought it up, like everybody basically told him how stupid they're going to do that. And so then I knew it was good. But ultimately, you know, it's just one of those things where I think the best way, especially for field ops, to manage that from our side is like, we got to get it on the calendar. And so we get it on the calendar, it's set. A lot of our jobs, same thing, like unfortunately in our industry, we're required to work nights and weekends on certain jobs, it's contractual. But like, it's the same thing. It's like, all right, who's got the weekend shift? Who's got the night shift? And I think the folks that can think that way and get it on paper do better with it. And there's some rules around it. Like if you want to take more than just 2 weeks at a time, there's a certain level of approval. If you got to do it within 48 hours to take it, there's a certain level of approval. But when we really started dialing in, we were like, well, maybe these 1 or 2 people would take advantage of it. And then the question became like, well, we're not going to write a policy around 1 or 2 people. And then if somebody would take advantage of it, is that our culture anyway? And that bring up other questions about some of those people. And so, you know, we're early into this, but so far, so good.
Yes.
I just want to make the point that you know, you talked about suicide before, and for someone who has recently gone through this with someone that I was very close to, when suicide happens, the pain for that person is over, and it just starts a ripple effect that absolutely devastates everyone who was ever close to it. So it's not just the one person that we need to focus on; it's the entire people around it. I mean, we're still suffering, and it happened 2 years ago. We still get together and cry. So
So for the audience, is there any resource like a survivor resource group that you
we tried that, and I think that the best resource group is each other. It's the family unit, and even though the families spread apart, we still get together as often as we can, and we give each other support whenever we can. I mean, that's all we can do. I mean, some of us aren't real strong believers in the psychology or the psychiatry aspects of business. I mean, I've been to both, and I haven't found either one to be effective. So I think it's more something that's it's a mental thing. It's support you get from family is the strongest thing you can do. Much stronger than drugs, and it's much stronger than talking to a stranger.
I'm actually going to say that. My dad died. I have 3 brothers, And there's no one in the world that can understand that pain except my three brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I can talk to people about it, and I can be honest, and I can be vulnerable, but the three of them, it cuts them exactly the way it cuts me.
Especially if it's just totally unexpected.
Yep.
And it's even more devastating.
Even more than we need to create that sort of, yes.
Yeah, can y'all expand a little bit more on how can, and I want to call the security address that I really want to, but.
Probably, yes.
Yeah, so please don't shut up if you already did, but, I'd really like to understand how can, leadership, set better examples around vacation, around mental health, around those kind of things. Something that we struggle with is, sometimes people say all the right things, right? And then they don't live that out, and it sends very weird messages the whole way through the organization. So I just, anybody could expand on that.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of it, earlier, so you can shut it down.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming, Chris, by the way. There are some other things also, Skyle, some of the policies they're doing is absolutely tremendous, but if you're a manager of people, you need to fully support your people with what they need, right? I can tell you, a previous company of mine, they talked all about work-life balance and mental wellness and all that. I would have never felt comfortable over there calling my boss and saying, hey, dude, I need a mental health day off, right? That would not have gone over. Over at TD, one day I was coming into work and for no reason whatsoever, I'm bawling as I'm driving down the road. So I called my boss and was like, hey man, I can't do this today. And he's like, hey, no problem. What do you need? You got any meetings you need me to take care of? You got any training scheduling? I can help you out. What do you need? You go home, enjoy your day, get whatever you need. Just call me, let me know what you need me to handle for you. I mean, that's a huge, huge weight off someone's shoulders whenever they're suffering to know that they're supported, right? And then even beyond that, later on this week, I'm going to speak to Prism Electric. I've talked to K-Post. I've talked to other subcontractors. That's no benefit to my company whatsoever, but it's all part of our environment, right? And so my supervision is like, hey, yeah, if you can help them out, why not? So having that support behind you is huge. That's what I would say is know your people and support their needs.
I want to add to that because we talked.
You want to add to it on the.
Go, you go.
I'm not from the construction industry originally, I've gotten into. Just listening to this group, I'm going to have Skyle and TD. Are your organizations servant leaders?
So I'll tell you about TD real quick. We started servant leadership. Seriously, Robert Greenleaf, I don't know if you're into servant leadership or not, he's the guy that originally developed it. Our founder of our company went to church with Robert Greenleaf, and he brought this pamphlet home one day that was the servant as a leader. And he brought it home and he showed his wife. He's like, hey, this is how I'm gonna lead our company. And so he started bringing in all of his top people, what they call spaghetti dinners, starts ordering all these pamphlets from Robert Greenleaf, and he's like, hey, what do you need these for? He goes, because this is my business now, this is what we're doing. So him and Robert got together and actually developed servant leadership. So yes, we are.
I read on South Street, we do embrace it, correct?
Absolutely.
How many other people in other companies know what I'm talking about? Are you in a servant leadership corporation? Or is it business? Because I hear a lot of people say, my company says all these things, but they don't do it. If they say it all right, but they don't do it, are not servant organizations.
Correct.
And I'm going to guess, if you can't communicate your process, you have a mental health issue, you don't have a servant leadership organization, because they're not listening to you.
100%.
And if you're saying, what do we got to do in our company? Just to know people. Investigate servant leadership, myself, not your problem.
If you're in leadership, but if you work for those companies that are not servant leaders, you're still going to have to figure that out.
Now I'm from a smaller construction business, but in general, construction companies are not huge corporations. Not like IBM. I got trained in servant leadership, the guy named Tim Downey, who taught IBM. So the big companies get it. It's something you can apply as a small company, but you got to learn it and you got to really go after it. And I think Lean speaks to that too.
You had something to say?
Oh, yeah. No, Jess was talking about how things sneak up on you, before you know it, and all of a sudden you big, and then big bang, and you're trying to and resolve. And, you know, what I'm noticing today, even with myself, is that I have to find a way to do a self-inventory. You know, because I realize in that self-inventory, I carry a luggage to work every day. And in that luggage, you know, it's a lot of different stuff going on in that luggage. You know, like up in my head, you know, a lot of stuff. And that's why I say sometimes when I let work, and then I do the same thing when I go home. See, I take another bag of luggage home and dump it off at home. You know, so I have to continuously do that self-inventory to make sure I don't dump the wrong bag in the wrong place. You know, because everything up in my head don't need to come out of my mouth. That's one of the training tools that I use for me today. And so as long as I'm doing that self-inventory, I find myself, and especially, we was talking about alcohol, so I caught myself there during the COVID time, you know, isolated, and then my consumption became more. Well, I knew it, I didn't stop it, but that self-inventory would say, hey, you're gonna hurt yourself if you don't watch yourself. You know, so there must be a way that we can encourage, even whether it's in a safety meeting or however, our people to do an inventory. You know, it's not weekly or daily, weekly or monthly, to just try to help balance some of that stuff up in their head, you know. That makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I want to add this because I'm going to give you a tool that you can leave here today and everybody can use it. Okay, because we love tools. Everybody loves tools. So Keon hit on this a little bit earlier on how he had to make a mind shift on when he was engaging people. When you go back to your office space, when you go to your job site, okay, and you ask a question, just shut up and listen, because guess what? We suck at listening. And they're going to say stuff if you just shut up and listen to them. And they're going to give you cues, and they're going to give you information that they weren't before, because guess what? You either didn't ask the question, or you ask it because you need to check that box, and then you're already moving on to something else. And if there was a moment there where they may have said something, guess what? It's gone. So when you ask a question, and it could be, how was your day? How was your weekend? It could be anything. Just make yourself, make a decision, an intentional decision, that tomorrow when I go to work, I'm going to ask the question and I'm going to shut up and stand right in front of them and look at them and let them answer. Because it is going to blow you away what you haven't been doing. And even if you think, I suck at listening, that's the worst thing I can do. But I know it, so I'm intentionally trying to do it better every day. And more people are coming and sharing and talking to me because I'm shutting up and listening to them. And that's a tool you can take anywhere, home or work. A lot of baggage, all that stuff in your head, but when you're not talking, you're able to receive. You can't receive when you're talking.
I think part of that is we need to change our questioning. I'm not very good at this myself, but I mean, if you really want to have a conversation with somebody, you need to change the way that you approach that conversation. So everybody walked into here today, you all walked over to somebody and said, hey, how you doing? And what was the answer they gave you? Good. And then what did they say back? What about you? And what was your answer? Right? So we need to get away from those generic, easy out questions, right? Instead of saying, hey, how was your weekend? Say, hey, did anything happen over the weekend that you need some help with or support with, right? Ask those questions that prompt a different answer, right? You know, instead of saying, hey, how's your morning going? It's like, hey, you got anything troubling you today? Is there anything that you'd like to talk about? Any help you need today? Are you behind on a project, something I can help you with? Ask them questions that are designed to get them speaking about the problems rather than just the community accepted good.
Polite.
Yeah. Actually, I got a few candid responses. If I do better, I have to sit in my hands, keep clapping. I'm never that good, but that's my standard answer.
So I have a tool that, again, I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm happy for you all to come up and if you want to take pictures of it. I don't know if it's okay, but I'll let you do it anyway. But at the beginning of all of our jobs, we have everybody fill out a worksheet. Because we have to start at the beginning. We can't come in halfway through and decide all of a sudden we care about people. But we start the jobs at the beginning and they all fill out a worksheet and it's, what trainings that they are thinking about doing or whether they want to grow their capabilities, different activities that they've been involved in that they would think this team would be a good idea, vacation ideas, plans that they have, any community service that they want to do, any personal time that they want to make sure that they're taking time off. They fill it out, and then the next thing that happens is it gets populated on a board, because we like the boards and lean. A board that's as big as, the wall, and all those dates get populated on that calendar for the whole team to see. And guess what else is on here? All of those project schedule milestones that maybe if you have some options, this is probably some time we're really going to need to make sure we're all hands are on deck. And it's not, hey, next week, guess what? Whatever you plan, it's gone. It's here's the milestones and here's the things that we're going to really need to make sure that you're here if possible. And this is on the wall, where everybody gets to see it, and it's birthdays, and it's vacations, it's weddings, it doesn't even matter. But taking away the stigma of all that other, we're not talking about it, we'll see if you can do it. We're having those conversations up front. The worksheet is here, and it's just, again, everybody fills out stuff, everybody looks at it, there's not one person that goes, oh, yours is not as important as his, let's see which one takes priority. Everybody puts it up there, and everybody talks about it, and then again, they revisit it because things shift, the schedule shifts, different things can change. Those are things that we have to have. We have to have those conversations to let them know not only we care about you, but we're listening to you, and we're going to value the things you say. So again, if you care about it, you take a picture of it, you can snap it. But this is just one tool for us to continue to reinforce that we're not just saying it. We're not just going, we do care, but we don't care about what you care about. We've got to stop. We've got to make sure that they know that we care about them, because we're going to lose people. We've got to keep people in our industry. We've got to make sure that they know their value. Okay.
We got 4 minutes. Closing thoughts?
Tons of them.
Okay, singular, closing thought.
I would say my one takeaway today, how many people in here have taken a CPR course? Show of hands. Awesome. How many people in here have ever given someone CPR? Show of hands. 3, 4. Okay. How many people in here have ever taken a mental health first aid course? 2. How many people in here have ever dealt with someone having a mental health issue? Hey, mental health first aid courses are free. Just look it up online. They're all done through government grants. You can find them pretty much anytime you want. Because they're done, you can find a course where you pay them to come in and teach, right? But if you want to do a free course, they're done through grants, so you may get bump time or two, like a big police station wants to send a whole bunch of people. So if you're kind of flexible, you can take those for free. Another great thing about TD is they just paid $2,200 for me to go take the instructor course in 3 weeks. So I'll actually be teaching that course to our people. But I highly encourage everybody to take that course.
Thank you.
And love languages. Switch to love language.
Just appreciate everybody's openness and engagement to have this conversation. This is a lean conversation.
No, these conversations are where it starts. Just the ability for us to engage and really step out. I love the participation from this, stepping out and really leading in those, the top of the company, and even from the bottom. We've all got to be home for it. We're not on an island. We're not alone. We're all dealing with it. So let's quit pretending we're not. Just adjust to the reality, and then let's all move forward together.
I want to add something. And I'm feeling kind of vulnerable now.
Okay, we got you back.
I lost my son 6 years ago, and my first one and 2 boys. It's something I haven't dealt with at all. I just keep myself busy. You talk about life work. I really deal with work. I started a whole nonprofit. Just doing all kinds of stuff, just to keep my mind out of it. But what you guys have given me today, I need to go get some help because I feel myself like I'm starting drowning. And who wants to accept that they lost the first time? And it was a car accident, and it was happening. I raised my grandbabies. They look just like, I mean, it's bittersweet, but at the same time, I'm not healthy, you know, so sad I drink, or I'm cussing somebody out, or I'm doing whatever, and everybody's not really knowing what's going on with her. But nobody knows because I don't freaking talk about it. It's too painful to talk about. You know, what you were saying, like, whoever happened to you 2 years, it's been 6 years for me, but it's like it was yesterday, you know? So anyway, I just really appreciate this conversation. And I'm going back, I did Leadership Dallas back in 2002. That's how I got accepted into Leadership Dallas, I feel, because I brought up mental illness. I brought it up back then. I brought it back because I thought that more Black people went to jail than to hospitals to get help. You know, and that was something very dear to my heart. So I really appreciate everything that you guys have shared. So I thank you.
I want to give credit to Rachel, so please follow up with her. I had a call with her yesterday, and we talked about today. She's like, I'm struggling right now with tomorrow. She's like, what's the agenda? She's like, I'm a single mom, and I have a toddler, and I'm trying to figure out who's going to pick her up. I said, Rachel, stop.
Right.
What time do you need to leave to be able to get where you need to be? She goes, I know it goes out. What time do you need to leave? She goes, I can't leave. I got to leave at 5. I mean, you walk out at 5. So that's where she went. And I was so happy that she had the conversation with me that she did not feel obligated to have to figure out her life to stay an extra 30 minutes here when that we need to normalize those conversations. So again, follow up with her, give her some love because that is where she went. She didn't get to do final thoughts, but I wanted to give one for her because she made the priority today. And again, we need to celebrate those things. So.
2 thoughts.
Okay.
One, gratitude to the folks that shared, like, got pretty darn vulnerable in here, including the panel. Thank you for that. That's a real gift. The other thought, building on what Nathan brought up, we got to connect, right? Christopher, you talked about, like, we share with our people. We don't have to carry the pain by ourselves. We can share it with people. There are men and women out there on our job sites that are nameless, that are voiceless, and we are responsible for that. So the action is, once a week, you get gold stars if you do it every day. Go out and walk that project, walk your office, and meet somebody you don't know, and learn something about them. You could change their life. It will feel like they matter. It will no longer be less than. And that's how those conversations start. That's the action.
Yes. And again, I mean, we say people just want to matter. They just want to matter. That's it. I mean, bottom line, people just want to matter. And when you stop and you give them a little bit of time, what you're going to get back is, it's tenfold. So, thank y'all so much.
We have been in the room for a little while, so feel free to converse. I'm sure you'll hear saying about this.
Hey, I'm very willing to help anybody. If y'all want to find me on LinkedIn, Matt Clark is
And there you have it, no BS. They killed it. As they're departing, we're going to mute them. Oh my goodness, that was amazing.
No BS. So they can see us.
Look, they got the selfie going on. Hey, we see you. Maria, it was awesome having you with us. Mitchell, fantastic. Loved it. Armando, you are the man. Tuning in twice. We got all kinds of folks. George Hunt, Jeremy Atkinson opened up. Amy Campbell, just the crew was here in force. Appreciate it so much.
Lyndon was
hey.
like last minute, jumped in, took over the camera. She made it happen for us. Give her some love, people.
Baller. Welcome to the tribe, gal. Welcome to the tribe. Good thing I didn't have him on mute there. A true honor to be plugged in from a distance. Love these conversations, as Jen and Jess say. This is only the start with everything we got going on in the No BS tribe. This is what we do. We have normalized some of these topics, and we're going to make it happen. So thank you for tuning in. Look forward to catching up on this, watching it again, learning, taking more nuggets that we didn't get here. So thank you all. Have a good one.